Hi, Anthony. How are you?
I'm doing good. Well, how are you doing?
Doing fine. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it as well.
I really loved your bio when I got it, and I said, "Oh yeah, I want to get this guy on the show," because I think, in one sense, a lot of people have gone through what you went through, but in another sense, you did it very young, and so that was kind of cool for me. Um, you know,
I,
with the
I
especially with the credit card, yeah.
I definitely think, and I always tell people, and this is my best advice to people, is start young. When you start young, you have time to make up for the mistakes that you're going to incur during your career as an entrepreneur and during your career as whatever it is that you're trying to do. When you start like me at the age of 15, which is a little younger than most people, I had plenty of years to get it right. When you start at the age of 40 and you've worked for somebody for most of your life and you decide at the age of 40 that you're going to go on a different path and do something for yourself, you're going to build your own dream, it's feasible, but the chance to recoup if something goes wrong is just a little harder. So to really get it right, I always tell people start before you're ready.
Start before you're ready. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's a strategy with people in the stock market too. Is if they start when they're in their 20s, they put everything in high risk because if they lose it all, they got time to regain it again. You know,
Correct. Yeah.
where if you're in your 60s, you don't want to put all of it in to something that's going to be not there the next day if there's a crash.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
I always tell people, and I've used that sentence many times, start before you're ready.
Well, let's just do the story about your credit card because I think that's kind of a funny story. At 23, you were invited to apply for an American Express, the black card.
Correct. So at the age of 23, I got an invitation in the mail inviting me to the prestigious Centurion Black American Express. And it was, I'd say it was a pinnacle somewhat in my life because nobody really gives you an award for anything. Nobody says you've done a good job. Here's a pat on your back. It really is the only tool you can use to evaluate yourself against your peers. And to get that, it's a high recognition that you've done something right, both financially and they're recognizing you for your financial responsibility because it has no limit, the card, and they don't give out many of them. The statistics are not exactly known, but I do know that there's only a handful of them out there, for each state. So it was very prestigious to get it, and I worked I worked very hard to have it. But yeah, when I got it, they told me I was one of the youngest members ever to be invited to the club.
Now that card is made of metal, right? Not plastic.
Correct. It's actually I believe it's titanium. I believe the
Titanium.
entire
Yeah.
card is made of titanium. Yeah.
So the card
And
itself is worth a few bucks, just just for the
it
metal.
is.
Yeah.
I hate to say that I eBayed a few of my expired cards over the years, but it does have some value to it. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. So after that, in less than 2 years, you were bankrupt and in debt for millions.
Well, I wouldn't say bankrupt, but I'd say pretty close to it. I never declared bankruptcy myself. I did find myself about $3 million in debt. I was living in Quebec at the time, where there was a lot of political turmoil between the French and English parties, and everything I had invested in suddenly was hugely devalued. People were no longer making payments on the buildings that I own, and I found myself overextended and unfortunately not enough cash to meet all those obligations. So perfect example of high moments to low moments and having to rebuild yourself at a younger age. I'm not sure that if I did that at the age of 40 or 50, I would have been able to recoup quite so well as I did.
So, how did you kind of climb out of the hole? What was the first thing you did?
It's a funny story. I think that if you let a little time pass, and you don't rush things, that sometimes opportunity really presents itself. And I really talk about that in my book. One of my first chapters talks about realizing opportunity where most won't. And I had a friend who was in Miami, and he was going through some personal troubles. And I flew down to Miami just to console him and be a good friend. And while I was there, I found an opportunity in the United States that was the right opportunity. And it was a women's clothing store that was closing. And the owner wanted to sell nothing but the clothing. I convinced him to sell me the entire store, and I made a few $100,000 doing that in a very short period of time, buying it and then rebuilding it and reselling it. And that's something that I've been very good at most of my life, taking over other people's problems and turning that into a profit.
Well, people are going to ask the obvious question. If you were in debt for $3 million, how did you have the money to buy this guy's store?
You know, um, when you're in debt for $3 million, or when you're able to indebt yourself for $3 million, you have pretty deep reach into different credit cards and so on. You can always juggle things around, even though $3 million sounds like a lot. You can always move things around to get your hands on a few $1,000s. And I agreed to pay the guy $5,000 for the store down, and I agreed to make a payment 90 days later, which that money that I agreed to pay 90 days later was made through daily sales anyways. So I was really only putting out a few $1,000s, and that wasn't that difficult for me to get my hands on at that time.
You could have probably bought the store with your black card, right?
I could have, but I'm pretty sure that that would not have worked out. I'm pretty sure he wanted cash on the spot.
Okay. So then you got that store, and then you turned around and sold that store for a good profit, yeah?
I did, yeah. I bought that store. I think I paid $10,000 or $15,000 for the store. I sold it for, I think, about 325,000 back then.
Wow. In how much amount of time?
120 days, maybe 90 days. I put it on the market. I think it took about 120 total to close the deal.
So why was this guy wanting to get out if it was such a hot store?
He produced clothing. He was in the manufacturing part of the business, and he opened this up for his wife. The store was not hot. They were selling a T-shirt like this for $300-400 in Boca Raton, and unfortunately, as dumb as people are and they're ready to spend, they were not ready to spend $400 on a regular cotton T-shirt, and they were trying to create something that there was really no market for. When I went in, I slashed the prices 80%, and that's really how I was able to turn a dud into a stud.
A dud into a stud. That's
Correct, yeah.
a good term. So what was the next thing you did after that store?
After that, another store, same sort of deal, right next to me, right next to that store. I did the same thing, bought it out, turned it around, resold it. So two stores right next to each other in the same plaza. During that time, I was doing a lot of other stuff. I was going to industrial auctions. I was going to wholesale buyers in Miami. I was buying, I was selling. So I wasn't just doing this. I was doing many other things at the same time.
You're one of those guys that probably, like you said, you started at 15, but you just have that innate ability to sniff out an opportunity. Yeah?
Correct. And that's really, and again, I hate to say it, but that's really what my book is about. My book is about realizing opportunity where most don't. I think that most people pass by so many opportunities in their life because they're either too worried, too scared, or they don't recognize them. And I really think that that's what my book hits on and tries to move across is how to find opportunity where others haven't, and how to succeed in those opportunities.
It's interesting because I believe that people that have that keen sense of sniffing out an opportunity are sort of akin to a bloodhound in the sense of that is like the best dog that sniffs out, and they use them to try to find criminals that vanished or whatever. But there is a talent that people have like yourself that it's something you're just kind of born with. It's not something you'd ever learn in school. I really don't believe
I,
that.
I agree with that. I didn't mean to cut you off. I agree with that 100% in that you can teach this. You can learn theory, you can learn law, you can learn principles, but you're not going to learn how to be a real entrepreneur. Either this is in you or it isn't. And I often tell people you're not going to become an entrepreneur by going to business school and getting a degree in business. You might be tailored to work for a large corporation, but I don't believe that you can be a true entrepreneur. I believe that it's either born into you or it isn't.
Do you know what 1 year at Harvard Business School cost?
I don't know off by heart, but I would imagine that, if we're talking about just the business school or just the living costs and so on, I would imagine probably about 100,000 a year.
That's about right. You figure about $250,000. What would you do with that $250,000 rather than go to the school?
I think, first of all, I do have a degree. I have a degree from a very prestigious university. So I did go down the route of getting a degree because I did want something to fall back on. And I believe that education is very important. But that being said, instead of taking that money, I think that I would have gone and invested and used that money to learn. I'll give you an example. I lost one day on the stock market, $89,000 last year, $90,000 in one day. And what that taught me about investing, what that taught me about trading was invaluable. Even if I had paid for an education somewhere, that money that I lost gave me the real education that I needed to not make that mistake again. And, smaller examples where I've lost, a few $1,000s or a few $100s, nobody could have taught me that in the classroom. The only way to learn most of this is trial and error and doing, buying and selling and doing transactions and figuring out what works and what doesn't work.
$89,000 in one day. That had to have been stock options.
It actually wasn't stock options. Unfortunately, it was a pharmaceutical company that I believed in, and they did a reverse split, and the reverse split didn't work, and then they declared bankruptcy. It was a mess. It went
Oh,
from
okay.
good to bad in like 24 hours, and the stock went from $9 to I think 3 cents in probably 48 hours. So that was a huge loss, and I learned a lot about pharmaceutical stock is really where I concentrate most of my investment. I love pharmaceuticals. I thought that I knew what I was doing, and I thought I was a hot shot because I've made 30, 40,000 in 10 minutes worth of trading before, and I said, wow, you
Sure.
can't lose. And I sort of realized that, with some of these biotech companies, you can. And, it taught me a lot about how I trade, and I no longer trade the way I used to. I think you gave an example at the beginning of the show where you said, most people, when you're young, you can put your money into these high risk stocks
All
and,
right.
well, if you lose, you lose. I'm no longer at that age where I can do that. I just turned 39 a few weeks ago, and that's sort of, those days of high risk are done. I do see the end of my career in the next, 15 years where I want to stop doing a lot of what I'm doing. And in order to do that, I'm gonna need the financial ability to retire. So I'm no longer taking the risks that I used to take these days.
Okay, last question. What do you do now?
So now I own a small e-commerce company. I still minimally in the auction business. So most of my life has been spent as a licensed auctioneer. I'm doing a lot of consulting now for other auctioneers, and I do trade daily. Trading is my largest revenue source.
Day trading? You mean on the stock market?
You know, day trading, I think day trading is somebody who buys their stocks in the morning, buys their stocks the night before, and they're out within 24 hours and they're
Right.
looking for a very small marginal profit. I don't mind holding, even if I have to hold for a month or 2 months. I think that I'm buying very large quantities, but I'm trying to stay active daily by at least buying something daily and selling something daily out of my portfolio. But I do hold. I hold over long periods.
Well, the technical term for a day trader is somebody who buys in the morning and sells before market close.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you hold it for one day, you're not a day trader.
Exactly. No, and often people say that they're like, "Oh, you're a day trader," and I try to tell them, "Well, you have to buy and sell the same day and not hold overnight." I say I don't really fall into that, but the briefest explanation is I hold. Yeah, I try to hold now.
All right. Well, Anthony, thanks so much for coming on the show. My guest is Anthony Sadana. Your book, hold up your book again, please.
The Art of the Black Card, the No
The Art
Bullshit
of the
Guide to
Back Card.
Business.
Okay. And do you have a
And
website?
I do. It's Art Online, ARTT Online. There is a double T in the Art of the Black Card as well. You can find me on YouTube, Art Online. You can find me on Instagram, Art Online. You can find the book on Amazon, and you can also find it on eBay.
All right. Do you still have one of those black cards?
I still have one of those black cards, yes.
All right. Well, good for
Yeah.
you. All right, Anthony. Thank